This is episode 322 of Mitolife Radio. I have a return guest here, Dr. Scott Sherr, to talk about parasympathetic activation, how chronic stress affects our mitochondria, why he believes the solution is more than just dealing with your trauma, his thoughts on cannabis and alcohol, and specifically their effects on GABA. He talks a little bit about psilocybin mushrooms and why he's a big fan of ketamine, and why CO2 or carbon dioxide training can increase our resilience to stress. This was a shorter episode than normal, but I feel like everybody's stressed out from what's been happening on a societal level the last couple of years, and then you stack onto that personal life stress. And my reading of the world is that everybody is chronically stressed. So hopefully this episode gives you some solutions. Enjoy the show. Here is Dr. Scott Sherr. All right, Dr. Scott Sherr, welcome back.
Matt, I always appreciate the opportunity to come hang out with you, no matter what house, no matter what bunker, no matter what moose is in the backyard or not at the moment. So thank you for having me back, man.
Yeah, I always enjoy speaking with you. And I can't remember how many shows we've had, probably like 6 or something. Had one on hyperbaric, a couple on methylene blue, one on GABA. I think we talked about sleep for one. So a lot of good
Commune as well. Yeah, I think you're definitely the person that I've hung out the most with on podcasts, and I appreciate it. Like before we started recording, I mentioned, and I think this might be funny for listeners, is that, you know, when you're talking about new topics, it's always nice to have somebody that's open and can, you know, express their own opinions and experience, and, you know, and have that, you know, way of navigating. So this is a new topic for me, kind of, right? But just more just like a different angle. And so I'm excited to dig into all of this with you today, man.
I'm excited. Yeah. Funny enough, the Trocalm, I love how it tastes, but I don't get the same personally, and maybe it's a genetic thing, the same relief from stress as I do from Trommune, the cordycepin, which is
It's
so
interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. You know, Trocalm, what's interesting about that particular one is that people will take Trocalm, have less anxiety, but not realize it because they're not tired or sedated after they take it. And that's the trick, is that most people that take anxiolytics feel sedated after they take them. So an anxiolytic, like your benzos, for example, like those are anxiolytic, but they also give you a sedative kind of quality to them. And so what's different about Trocalm is that it doesn't give you that sedative quality. And so some people don't realize, I'm not saying this is you, Matt, but some people don't realize that they feel less anxious because they're as awake as they were before, that kind of thing. Yeah, Trommune's interesting too, because it's working on so many different systems, because adenosine is what it acts like in the body. And so adenosine is something that increases sleep drive, sleep pressure. And so, but it's also working on mitochondrial function. It's working as an antioxidant. It's also probably downregulating the sympathetic nervous system as well. And so it's got all these other aspects. And I think where all of this kind of goes, as you and I know, is that, you know, so many of us, most of us, are living on all the time, right? Our stress response is just over abundantly the dominating aspect of our life. And, you know, the hustle culture, even in, you know, the middle of Idaho when you're running a bunker, is real, right?
Absolutely. What's funny is they look at people like me and you, and I've gotten judged before just for being stressed, like, oh, you're not taking the right supplements or whatever. But everybody's prone to it, right? If you're human, if you're an animal on planet Earth, you're stressed.
Yeah. I mean, so as animals, there's these great documentaries that you've probably seen, or some of your listeners have seen, on National Geographic, where you have this animal that's being preyed on by some sort of prey, you know, so let's call it like a lion or a tiger, right? Going after an elk or some other animal. And what you see here is what happens is, like, as this predator is going towards the prey, say they get the prey, but the prey gets loose, right? They don't die. What happens is, like, they have this sort of massive you could call it a sympathetic dump. Basically, they shiver, they'll look like they're like having like a seizure kind of thing, which just releases all of those neurochemicals that were just hugely released because they were about to die. So in nature, in essence, there really is only stress or no stress. There's not this like chronic stress thing that humans have. Like humans are social beings when we live in these formerly tribes and now in huge communities, social pressures and stresses, and so acute stress is normal, right? We all have acute stress, and acute stress is actually good for our body oftentimes. Maybe not almost getting eaten by a lion, but that kind of thing, right? And so, but the challenge is that from going from acute stress to stress that's happening all the time, like even though it's not as serious as like almost being killed, like this sort of like these like less than mortal wounds that sort of happen and continue, like it's like death by 1,000 cuts kind of deal, where it's like, what's the like that's like water torture kind of deal, right? Like little drip on your forehead, just slowly and slowly, right? And over time, your nervous system just gets dysregulated in a way that all those hormones and all those neurotransmitters, that are just being released all the time, start causing detrimental effect on the entire system, especially your mitochondria, right? So,
yeah, I got goats again. I missed my goat milk. And
nice.
Goats and I think most animals besides guinea pigs, a couple others, make their own vitamin C endogenously, and that's an anti-stress component. So a good point about the animals. They shake, they make their own vitamin C, which is anti-stress. We don't make our own vitamin C because we lack the enzyme to do that. So, so many effects. And we were talking about before we hit record environment, because for me, being 100% off grid, rural, 40-minute drive to town is less stressful for me. But for some people, that would be stressful. They prefer in the city, having a grocery store 10 minutes away or 5 minutes away. For me, that is super stressful, being that close to a store. So there is this individual aspect to it, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, everybody's going to be different here as far as what makes them feel like that stress is good stress, and then what that stress is not good stress. And that's also going to change as we navigate our lives. But the challenge, I think, is that most of us don't know how to shut off that nervous system. Most of us don't understand how to relax anymore, because that's not part of the culture. You're not allowed to relax. Although, the things are maybe changing a little bit, but like as an entrepreneur, as you are, as I am, and having a lot of things going on always, it's like, well, how much can we get done in a day? How many tasks can I get done? How many meetings can I get done? How can I optimize my sleep so much that I can go to bed and get 6.5 hours of sleep? And that's all I need, because I've got enough deep sleep and I've got enough REM sleep and I've optimized my sleep routine. And even when you're trying to relax, you're still like regimenting and optimizing and all those kinds of things. The problem with that is that our body needs to relax to be able to detoxify, to recover, to digest our food. And so over the years, Matt, this has become like really obvious to me, right? Where I've worked with patients for a long time now. I was actually looking at, it's actually 20 years this year that I've been seeing patients. And it's very obvious to me when I work with people, like usually in about 30 seconds, but maybe up to 5 minutes in some cases. But if I'm going to be able to help them immediately, or if it's going to be something where they need to really downregulate their nervous system at the same time as working on their gut or working on their neurotransmitters or their hormones or whatever it might be. So, what I found is that if you're not working in that sympathetic downregulation at the same time as trying to optimize somebody's gastrointestinal system, you will not see the improvements in their gastrointestinal system, no matter what. Like, actually, the first way I saw this, Matt, was doing hyperbaric therapy with patients. Somebody would come in with, let's say it's a chronic concussion, and they've had neurologic symptoms for a year or two. And then it's pretty straightforward. You go into hyperbaric therapy, you're going to get more oxygen, the brain's going to feel better, full stop, right? But no, that doesn't happen. There is a proportion of people there that will have no benefit. Like, I felt nothing. And if they feel nothing, it's almost always because their sympathetic nervous system is just so overloaded compared to their parasympathetic that they cannot come down to a place that they can actually heal. And this is just so much more common than I realized. It's not like you need to be sexually abused or like have verbal trauma as a child. This could be just you had a severe, trauma with big T, little t, all that crap. But like, I just mean like severe stressful event with building a bunker, right? And spending all this money, right? Or like I was talking to a patient just before we got on that has long COVID for the last 3 years and has gone through this whole process of like having to quit school. And now they're living with their parents and they're trying to get better. And then, there's also this sort of enmeshment with other people in their lives with other stress, and that's causing other issues. And like, it's just like compounded shit over time. And then it's like, you look at this sort of bubble of shit and you go like, okay, I know there's a lot of things metabolically that I need to help you with, right? But none of that's going to start working until we start really down regulating that nervous system in a way that's actually going to help them be more coherent energetically so that they actually can start healing,
Yeah. Yeah. I started in my parents' garage and then moved into an RV. You might have seen my past before I started Mitolife.
I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Financial to me seems to be the biggest stress of them all, just from my belief system. But yeah, you're right. There's the family relationships, the romantic relationships, the environment. There's all these factors, right? And I think the financial gets to me because in our health community, I'm sure you see it, people selling a lot of BS, quantum stuff, and
Sure.
thousands and thousands of dollars and overpriced water filters and all sorts of stuff. And that really charges me up because people are wasting their money on a lot of stuff. So that's why I like having the podcast and educating on, okay, what are the priorities of spending your money on?
Yeah. 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 I think it's so important because there's so much stuff out there. And what it comes down to is like, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. As I mentioned to you before we started recording, is like, there's this vicious cycle, right? Because all these stress hormones get released and maybe for good reason, maybe not. It depends on the situation. But if it maintains like that, you have these high levels of stress hormones, what happens is it causes a lot of stress on the mitochondria itself. Like the mitochondria are part of the cell that make energy. These catecholamines like norepinephrine, epinephrine, even dopamine and serotonin, these all will help they're trying to get your mitochondria to help make more energy, right? And as a result of that, you're going to make more, not only you're going to make energy, but you're also going to make more, quote unquote, waste products of energy metabolism, right? And energy metabolism means like when we make energy in the mitochondria, we make something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. ATP, it's our energy currency. It's how we make energy in the body. And we make about 165 pounds of ATP every single day. So it's a lot of ATP. But you don't just make ATP when you're making energy. You also make waste products like carbon dioxide, water. We need oxygen to make energy. And that's carbon dioxide. And then we have plants that do the opposite. Everybody remembers this from 7th grade. Plants have CO2, they make oxygen. We use oxygen to make CO2, but not just CO2, we make water. In addition, we also make what are called reactive oxygen species, right? So ROS. Reactive oxygen species are these sort of free radicals. They are unpaired oxygen molecules typically, and they can make different things. They can be unpaired oxygen molecules. They could be O2, they could be O1, O3. O3 is ozone, by the way, for those that are listening. And you also have hydroxyl OHs, and then you also have hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. So these are the main oxidative free radical kinds of things that the body uses. And we can use them for a lot of different reasons. We can use them to signal the mitochondria to say, hey, you're making too much energy, slow it down. Or hey, I'm overloaded, please slow down, right? And then, or we can use them as anti-infectives. We use these free radicals as they can get stored in places in the cell, a place called the lysosome that releases them when the cell's under attack, for example, by a virus or bacteria or a fungus or something like that. Interestingly, small note is that high doses of methylene blue actually increase hydrogen peroxide production. And this is the way they actually work that's how methylene blue works as an anti-infective. But that was a side point, but just kind of a fun fact.
But your green blue though? No, I'm just kidding.
You talked about our last podcast, right? Yeah. The answer is no, everybody, you're okay. But when it comes down to this stress, this reactive oxygen species, what happens is that what the body's supposed to do is actually respond by having these antioxidants neutralize that oxidative stress. But if these catecholamines, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine are being released in such huge quantities all the time, all this energy is being made, all these reactive oxygen species are being made, the body gets depleted in antioxidants. And then these reactive oxygen species cause significant amount of inflammation and rust and deterioration of mitochondrial function, right? And there's also these other aspects of the hormones released. Like one of the other stress hormone that gets released a lot is cortisol, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone that gets released, when you have a stressful event. We need cortisol. Cortisol is really important. It's our stress hormone, but it's also the one that gets us up and going as well in the morning. And so, but the problem with too much cortisol is it also has a detrimental effect on mitochondrial function. It suppresses your capacity to make new mitochondria. Just also this dysregulation in calcium signaling and all these other kinds of things. You have like this, the what's called NF-kappa B activation, which is these inflammatory pathways that get released or get upregulated as well. So it's like, it's a whole mess, you know? So the reason why I'm mentioning all this is that somebody comes to see me, they're like, well, doc, like I need to fix my mitochondria. I'm like, you're absolutely right. Like, yeah, your mitochondria are screwed right now. Or they're, the spectrum of screwed. It might be like, it's not like you're going to die because right now, it's just that your mitochondria aren't working so well. So that's why you have brain fog, concentration problems. That's why, you have GI distress. It could be a lot of different things. But if I just work on that aspect of things, just work on the mitochondrial function, it's like, what's the overarching on all of this, right? And that's this, sympathetic activation aspect of it. And so you'll find this funny, Matt, like there's a lot of stuff out there now. Oh, just deal with your trauma and everything else is going to get better, right? The answer is like, no, it's not, because like that's going to help, like for sure. But if you don't actually work on the physiologic aspects of what's happened because of that stress, there's only so far you can go. So like, I think what I'm trying to emphasize here maybe is that you need to do both, right? You need to work on mitochondrial function. You need to work on sympathetic activation. But if you just do one or the other, you're not going to see, the benefit that you're really truly looking for, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to bring up the point, like all the different health camps have the different solution that they're packaging and selling to you while you're stressed. So you might remember like when I was heavy into Ray Peat, and I still draw on a lot of his work. I think he was a genius.
Going back to goat milk. So
their whole solution is not enough sugar, because sugar lowers cortisol and it's not cortisol.
Sure.
That's one piece. People not eating enough, doesn't have to be white sugar, but carbs in general. And the carnivore keto people are like, not enough protein. That's why you're stressed. And then biohackers are like, you're not using neurofeedback. That's what I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah. No, so you'll probably find it quite interesting, actually. As a side note, this also has relevance, is the sugar diet craze that's happening right now, right?
Right. Yeah. Always extremes. And people say I'm extreme, but I feel like I've never been carnivore. I've never gone sugar diet. I've always still balance of things.
Yeah. I mean, really what the sugar diet is an extension of Ray Peat's work, right? And that's what it comes down to. And what I've been finding now is that people are seeing things about the sugar diet, and then they're actually getting gravitated towards Ray Peat's work as a result of the sugar diet. But I think it's a really interesting example of exactly what we're talking about here, which is, and you just described it, right? So what happens is when you eat sugar, your insulin levels go up, your parasympathetic nervous system goes up as well, because your GABA levels go up, right? So we've talked about GABA in other podcasts, but GABA is your primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it relaxes, it's the brakes of your brain, right? This is why you want to take a nap on the couch after your turkey dinner on Thanksgiving, is that your insulin levels are shot up through the fucking roof because you just had a huge amount of food. And so your GABA levels are up significantly as well. So you feel like you're drunk on food, because that's where alcohol binds to, is the GABA receptor, right? So it's very interesting. And I have a patient actually who's also sympathetically dominant and, been working on this for a while. And he started the sugar diet and he felt fantastic. Like he said, I haven't felt this way. I haven't felt this good in years. And he's been like, not carnivore, but it's like keto, low carb, high protein. And so what I found really interesting about that is like, this is what it feels like to be parasympathetic, man, And so that's what I think Trocom is good for, actually, when we talked about in the beginning, is that for a lot of people, they don't know what it even feels like to downregulate the nervous system in a way that actually makes them feel calm. I remember, you'll like this story. I was a lady, a friend, I was working with her at the time, and we gave her a microdose. She took her own microdose of mushrooms. I didn't give it to her. She took her own. And all of a sudden she had this like anxiety response. And I was trying to figure it out. And I realized, oh, no, she doesn't know what it feels like to actually have a nervous system that's not on high alert all times. And I've actually seen this over the years now with Trocom too, is that you give somebody Trocom and they have this sort of reflexive anxiety response. It's because they're not used to feeling the anxiety. They're not used to feeling like their nervous system is calm. They're used to feeling this anxiety the whole time. And so like having the lack of anxiety or lack of sympathetic dominance gives us a reflexive anxiety, and it can be very, very, very dysregulating for people. And so, but working people through that and saying, okay, this is how it feels to be calm, then they can start getting back there in other ways, right? And that might be through, we can talk about lots of different ways. I know that maybe selling property was your way and going back to homesteading. Other people, it might be starting a breathwork practice or doing yoga or changing their diet. Maybe not as extreme as the sugar diet, but like doing other things where, or getting rid of a partner, like, or sleeping in a different room from your partner if they snore. Or, and it's sort of a bigger bucket to start thinking about, which is the trauma bucket, right? If there are significant things in your past, it could be that you need to start working on those directly to really see the benefit from a healing and recovery perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny about the microdose.
I've seen it a number of times, man. Like, and it's not like, of course, we know about THC gummies and people going crazy and getting anxiety, but the THC, interestingly enough, is something that blocks the GABA receptor. So that's why people can get anxiety when they smoke marijuana with THC, because they get the anxiety response related to blocking that GABA receptor. Some people have a higher or more significant response, and I don't even know the strains, but there's different strains that have different, whatever that chemovars, something was the word for them. I'm making this up. It's something like that, right? Certain strains, but THC itself typically causes.
Is that what you're talking? Yeah.
There's like different
bars. Is that what you're trying to say? I don't know.
Something like that. I don't remember the name. I was never a marijuana connoisseur. The ones that make you more relaxed, the ones that make you
sativa or indica.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, like those kinds of things. Yeah. I think chemovars is it's for something else entirely. But anyway, but the idea with marijuana is that, right? So some people will get the munchies and want to chill out on the couch. Other people will want to freak out and go to the ER. I think they're going to die. And like that's part of that's related to the type of strain, but also, but what's going on there is the GABA receptor is being blocked. And so the goal really is to rewire your sympathetic and parasympathetic balance into a way that you have the capacity to oscillate, to go back and forth between the two, because all of us need to have stress and we utilize that on a regular basis, but we have to be able to turn that off. And so, but the problem is like, if you can't, like if you have like, what's the best way to describe this with not being on camera, but like you have think about it as a reserve, like you have a certain amount of reserve of capacity, right? And if you're already always in sympathetic dominance, your capacity to increase that sympathetic tone, increase your sympathetic, is going to be smaller compared to if you're already coming from a lower place. Your capacity to go up and tolerate more stress is higher, right? So your capacity to tolerate stress is higher if you're coming from a lower sympathetic dominance, as opposed if you're higher sympathetic, you're not going to be able to tolerate a lot more stress. You have a less capacity there. I think that's the best way to describe it. And so the goal is really to try to rebalance and make it so that you have more of that reserve when you need it.
What are your thoughts on alcohol? Because cannabis and alcohol are probably the main two like sedatives or relaxing agents that people use, right?
Yeah. So alcohol, unfortunately, is pretty shitty, is what it comes down to. Like, I think, there's a lot of stuff that's come out over the last several years about it shrinking your brain, and that is all probably true. The main thing that I think about here is that it's not, what it does is it binds to the GABA receptor in the brain, and it binds so tightly that it depletes GABA pretty quickly. And so you feel that relaxation, that euphoria, but it doesn't last very long. And then you need more of it to get that same effect if you're drinking all the time. I think occasional glasses of wine or alcohol, that's totally okay. But the challenge is that it does affect sleep as well. If you ever woken up after 2 hours of going to bed because you drank alcohol, it put you to bed, but you woke up 2 hours later with massive headaches, welcome to my world. I'm sure many of you can relate. That's because you've depleted GABA so quickly, and then you have GABA is always in balance with this other neurotransmitter in the brain called glutamate. And glutamate is our primary excitatory, GABA is our primary inhibitory. And so glutamate is converted into GABA into the brain. So GABA doesn't really get made outside of the brain very much. And so you have this glutamate conversion, which requires B6 and magnesium. And then all of a sudden you have all this alcohol in the system. You depleted all this GABA. So it's like this imbalance. You have tons more glutamate than GABA. And then that's why you get these like sort of glutamate toxicity symptoms. So you get headache, you get nausea, you get irritability. It's the MSG syndrome as well. But that's why that kind of, we talk about dehydration and talk about vitamin deficiencies, the diuretics aspect of alcohol, but the biggest thing is glutamate toxicity. And so I'm not a big fan of alcohol. There are some people out there I know that can drink and they feel great the next day. I had a college roommate that could, that could vomit and piss himself and be in an elevator and then wake up the next day and actually he went to sleep in an elevator once. And I remember this. And he woke up the next day. He's like, yeah, what's up? Let's go. I'm like, really, man? Like he had really good sort of Scottish, I think it was Scottish blood or Irish blood. Yeah, it was one of those mix. I can't remember which one is Irish or Scottish, but he had, that's scary to me, right? You could have somebody that has that capacity like that. That's how somebody becomes an alcoholic because they don't have any repercussions of drinking that much alcohol. I certainly did. I certainly did have repercussions. I don't know about you. What's your story with alcohol, Matt?
Yeah, I dabble. I interviewed the founder of ZBiotic. I think I found that Asprey. And that product is, I only drink if I take that beforehand.
Okay.
The acetaldehyde breaks down in the gut before it hits the liver. That huge difference of giving it to friends, that stuff works. But then like that's just one, the acetaldehyde is just one aspect, right?
Right. That's just one part of it. Yeah. That's a good point of it. Good point to remember. And the acetaldehydes there'll be different sensitivities depending on the person, right? But the big part that's missing there is that glutamate GABA balance as well. But yeah, the acetaldehydes are a good point to remember. I forgot about that. How could I forget about them? But they're important too. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, my sense of it is there's much better things to use that enhance the GABA system.
Does psilocybin help with that? Or
so psilocybin is more of a serotonergic kind of thing. So it increases serotonin. It does it, doing it by a very specific type of serotonin receptor. But what psilocybin does, a lot of these psychedelics do, is get out of your fucking head, right? So they get out of your stories, right? They get out of your, let's call it your default mode network, the DMN, and that's the part of our brain that tells us who we are, what we do, what we like, what we dislike, what we are worried about, what we're not worried about. So when you can sort of dampen the DMN, the default mode network, things aren't as stressful because you don't care as much, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to like take out the garbage tomorrow, but why am I stressing about it now? It's tomorrow, man. Right now I'm here, right? And so you get this sort of presence with psychedelics, even with GABA supplements I found too, because it kind of takes you out of, it just downregulates your default mode network, right? And that's a big component of this. When you can downregulate the default mode network, all of a sudden you can actually cross-pollinate in the brain in ways that you wouldn't have done it before. And that's really what's nice about psychedelics, is that you can create new connections from various areas to the brain that you wouldn't have been able to do it before because you would have gotten in your own way. And the you in that, if there is a you, is your default mode network, right? There's no you really, right? You, the whole sort of the deal that you like, who is I? I is just basically a conglomeration of neurons in your DMN that tells you who you are from moment to moment and gives you memory of what that is. Like in general, we're just a collection of cells that talk to each other in various ways. And, that's why I always say, I think I've probably given the statistic on this podcast, but we have an average of about 70,000 thoughts per day, like on average, right? If you're stressed, you're going to have 120,000. If you're anxious, et cetera. If you're depressed, same. It doesn't mean that they're 120,000 unique thoughts, but they're thoughts. And so that I always follow that up and say, well, don't believe everything you think, right? I mean, it's amazing just to realize how many thoughts that you're having on a single day and how many we get attached to and how many take us on these little journeys. Like, I'm thinking about what I have to do for dinner, and then where we're going to go for dinner, then how we're going to get to dinner, and then who's going to come with me, and then who's going to come in the car, and then who's going to drive because I've been drinking, and then like you just went on that road, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, that's like 10 minutes of like down the hatch, right? And so there's a lot of great analogies of this in meditation practice of how you like this one thought sort of builds on another and another and another and another, but you don't even remember what that first thought was anymore. Like, and the greatest example of this is my son, who's 8 years old, right? Like he has a thought, right? He attaches to the thought. He gets upset about the thought, but then he goes through his his upset thing, right? And then 5 minutes later, I'll be like, sweetie, you're still upset. He's like, yeah, but I don't even remember why, and you're like, that's the thing, right? Like the thought itself is gone, but that emotional roller coaster that you just went on for the last 5 minutes, right? It's like the train has left the fucking station, man. And so it's just so interesting to think about that in the context of what we're describing here is that if you can downregulate your DMN in various ways, meditation, even exercise will do it. Like, and then working on that parasympathetic activation, you're not going to get stuck as much and attached as much to stuff. And that's really what it comes down to is like, that's the whole practice of meditation in general is this not getting attached to stuff. Everything's going to arise. Your mind is as crazy as ever. Like, again, a good example is my 8-year-old again. Like, he's like, Dad, we watched this movie we watched this, one of the Mandalorian ones with the spiders. He's like, well, then I saw the spiders and the spiders are in my bed. And then I was thinking about these spiders and the spiders did this and the spiders did that. I'm like, okay, all right, let's break this down, So, but it's the same deal. Like you attach to this whole like road of terribleness, the road of, the road to the toilet is basically.
Do you think it's important to find things that distract you from that endless train of thoughts? Like for me, gardening, just being in my dome down here, whether it's weeding or planting seeds or getting ladybugs out of my koi pond that are drowning, all that stuff just like keeps my brain occupied. I know for a lot of people it's running, just heavy exertion.
Yep.
Just hiking in the forest, even around my lake. Activities like that, like just kind of distract me from where I definitely feel either I'm not noticing my thoughts anymore or they're becoming less and less.
You actually bring to like a really important point here is that getting out of our head is kind of the deal, right? And so you can get there using meditation, mindfulness, breath work, but you can also just move. Like moving your body in general is a great way to change your state. And it's a different type of flow. Like when you start gardening, when you're fishing, when you're doing other kinds of things, like your mind will be more focused on a task. And so that's really nice because it will sort of help, drown out some of that other stuff that's happening. So it's a great way to do it. I mean, over the long term, what I found is most beneficial is to be able to navigate and the attachments in regular life, right? Just having day-to-day conversations. And this is what meditation and those kinds of practices are for. But like, I know for me, like it's the summer right now and my kids get up later. So I get up a little bit earlier and I just take a walk around. I have a little bit of a lake right around my house. It's just a 1 mile loop. Like just doing that, like, and doing a meditation at the same time is like transformative for me, like for the rest of the day, just to kind of, just to reset and to reorient to the attachment aspect of things. And then everything else gets easier, right? Everything in my meetings get easier. My mood is better because I've created that structure and that reframe, right? So if it's gardening, if it's swimming in the pool, if it's, whatever it might be, it'd be going hunting for people and shooting things. It doesn't really matter what the end result is, really. It's more like, what is it going to do to your nervous system, right? And so I'm a big fan of everything you described, Matt. And I talk to my patients about this all the time, but then sometimes it's like gardening, fishing, walking. These are all good, but they're not enough because they have this big bucket of stress that won't be cracked until something more significant happens. And that's when you talk about psychedelics, right? That's when things like I've had a lot of success with ketamine over the years. I refer people over to ketamine clinics and they get ketamine psychotherapy along with the ketamine infusions. And that's one of the easiest, but it's actually a very repeatable way of detaching yourself from that default mode network that we were describing. And once you can detach and rewire, ketamine, what Dr. Ted once said to me, a colleague of mine that I work with, is he's the founder of the company's prescriptions and everything, is that having the right dose of ketamine or the right dose of psychedelics, it's like if you put fresh powder on a mountain and you're making new tracks in it going down. Like that's the capacity you have when you use psychedelics in the appropriate way, not when you're doing something ridiculous like watching porn, right? You don't want to have psychedelics and watch porn because like that's going to reprogram your brain in ways you do not want, I promise you. And so, but if you do it in a therapeutic setting, you can lay new tracks, right? And then that's the beautiful part is that once you start laying those new tracks with the right support, then you can start optimizing mitochondrial function. I can start looking and seeing the benefits of using methylene blue or using like dietary strategies or supplement strategies. And then even working on the GABA system at the same time with supplementation, like you've made the shift. Now we can really support that shift with practices that really can support long-term healing and improving and having a better regulated nervous system.
That's great. What are your thoughts on, or do you have any tips for specific strategies? Like I remember growing up and public speaking, I sucked at it. Whenever you have to get in front of class,
Sure,
do a
sure.
presentation, I was the worst until college. And then I just put myself in uncomfortable situations over and over and over again. And then here I am now with a podcast. It's like part of my job, but I used to be super socially anxious and not able to public speak at all. And you always hear that thought of just imagine everyone naked or whatever, like
Yeah,
the things that just make it seem ridiculous.
right.
I notice for me, if I ever catch myself and I'm out and I just feel overwhelmed, like I don't want to be in the grocery store, I don't want to see anyone. This is just too much, even just for like a millisecond of that thought. I notice that my vision's kind of tunnel, like I'm just seeing in a very narrow,
Hmm.
almost physically. And so
Yeah,
I just make a decision like, oh, I'm going to be aware of 360 around me and just notice more. And for some reason, that trick always works for me where it just immediately settles me down.
yeah, it's beautiful. You basically, it's a meditation trick, really, which is that you become the space where everything appears, right? Instead of being like everything's about you, no, you're just part of the whole space around you, right? So it's like it's a beautiful analogy. I love that that works for you, Matt. I mean, it's hard when you're stressed for people to be able to to do that oftentimes, but if you do it enough, if you do like the repeated pattern of changing perspective is really what you're doing, right? Like this is not all about me. This is just I see there's everything around me, right? I'm not just the center point of the world. I'm just part of the world itself kind of deal, right? So I love that. I think when it comes to acutely stressful events or stressful kinds of things, you did what a lot of people need to do, which is just force yourself to go do it over and over again and find strategies that work for you. And that's a great way to do it. But there are certain kind of techniques that you can work on to help with decreasing your anxiety response overall. And one that I've been working on intermittently is one is called CO2 tolerance training. And CO2 tolerance training is where you learn, obviously, we have oxygen and CO2. We've already discussed this a little bit, right? What you can do is you can learn that our impetus to breathe, our reason to breathe. Oh, there you go. You're using a paper bag over there, a bottle. Paper bags work, right? This is because what happens is that CO2 is actually our main stimulus to breathe. Okay. It's not oxygen. So, but when our CO2 levels get to a certain amount, we'll start getting anxiety response. If you hold your breath, everybody knows this. It'll be like, okay, cool. Then like, oh shit, I'm going to have to breathe, right? And like that's what happens is that the CO2 buildup actually affects the part of your limbic system in your brain, your amygdala specifically, which is your fear response. And that CO2 tells you, oh shit, I got to breathe, right? And so, but you can train your capacity to increase your CO2. And so that by doing that, your stress response will be mitigated, when you have a stressful experience. So it's a physical way of retraining your sympathetic dominance. But this is something that takes time. Like you have to be very ginger about this, especially if you're already on the stress side of things. But you can learn how to, what you'll find is that most people out here most people are hyperventilating. Most people are overbreathing throughout the day. And that means their CO2 levels are lower. So as a result of breathing off so much CO2, so that means their anxiety response, even at a little bit of a higher CO2 level, is going to be more significant because they're already at a lower set point, if that makes sense. And so what you can do is you can train your nervous system to tolerate higher amounts of CO2. And by doing this, it has a downstream effect on the capacity for you to tolerate more stress overall. So that's one technique. And there's a couple different ways to do it. The best way is the best thing to look at is, there's a guy named, what's his name? I have the book over here.
Oh, John,
What's that?
on Lawrence.
No, not John Lawrence. No, it's
There's,
it's called the Oxygen Advantage. It's
oh,
Patrick McCune. Yeah, and it's called the Buteyko method. And basically, you learn how to breath hold. You do it at rest. You do it with walking, and you do various strategies, and then you increase your. Actually, these have a lot of potential benefits of oxygen carrying capacity and increasing your exercise performance too. But CO2 tolerance, the way I think about it a lot is more from a parasympathetic sympathetic balance piece.
okay. Oh, the reason I interviewed the guy on carbon dioxide, what was his name? Scott. Can't remember his last name, but he has the CO2 inhaler.
Okay,
Started reselling it through him.
got it.
Put his label on it, but it's like basically $600 device, and Yeah, so you have a CO2 tank, and that's like a high tech way to do it.
Have you done that at all?
I have it right here. Yeah, I
Yeah.
start at like 1%, and then you slowly work up to 8% over like 10 minutes. Yeah, Carbogenetics, that's the guy.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard the company. I think that there have been a lot more. There's a lot more interest in the sort of the carbonic gas, the CO2 gas, for this reason, because it does not only does it work on the response that I just mentioned, but it also vasodilates. And that's the big thing. Is what happens is that if you have more CO2 around, what the body does in response to that is vasodilates, so that you try to get remove more oxygen to tissue and more removal of CO2. Because if you have more CO2 around, it's like the body's thinking, well, shit, like I'm in trouble. I need more oxygen. Right. And so you have to be very careful with carbonic acid or these kinds of things, because it can cause that stress response, really. It happened to me. I did this HOCAT machine. Have you ever done one of these things? This HOCAT? It's
Heard of it.
like, it's, it's a machine where you go in and they give you like lights and PEMF and ozone, and then also CO2. And you're like, but your head's out of it, but the rest of your body's in there. And I came out with a massive detox response. Like, because I'm used to heat. I do heat all the time, but I wasn't used to the CO2 aspect of things. And I think this the vasodilatory aspect of things. I was traveling. I was in North Dakota of all places doing a hyperbaric lecture the next day. And I just tanked. My immune system just tanked afterwards. I got through it, but just barely. So you have to be careful when
You bring up a good point, because I got into cold plunging for a little bit earlier this year, and then it broke. I don't know if the electrician was switching the breaker too much, but it just crapped out. So I'm like, maybe that's a sign. So
yeah.
back to a wood burning sauna, which I missed. But do you think, in the context of our conversation, acute cold exposure could be a detriment if someone's deep in a chronic sympathetic state all the time?
Oh, for absolutely sure, man. And the problem with cold plunges, crazes, is that people just obviously do it too much. And then every time you go into a cold plunge, you're going to release all those stress neurotransmitters. And then you go in directly to work, directly to meetings, directly to like cooking, and then you're basically just in stress mode all day. Right. And so, yeah, I saw this one video on Instagram that I responded to a while back of this dude that's like, I did 365 days of cold plunges. This is how I feel. I'm like, well, dude, you're lucky you're 20. At 25, your nervous system is going to fucking crash, right? Because that's what's going to happen, right? Your system is just not designed for that. If you're going to do something like that, you have to find a way to like absolutely downregulate your nervous system, to balance that. It's very hard to do. And you can deplete all those neurochemicals like your catecholamines and cortisol and all the mitochondrial this stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I think cold can be good, but oftentimes in people that are dysregulated, I do not recommend it, because it's going to cause that stress response that their body doesn't have the capacity to balance, right? And so in clinical practice now, it's really become like this thing where I'm working on the GABAergic side, working on their parasympathetic nervous system, optimizing that so they can heal, but then also thinking about the psychedelics, the ketamines, and like other sort of more major interventions that might be necessary, while I'm also, optimizing mitochondrial function. So using the methylene blue, optimizing with Trommune, as you said, and then working on their diet, their lifestyle, their vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors. So like, I still refer out for the parasympathetic stuff a lot, especially if it becomes more significant with trauma and with rewiring. But I think my emphasis to people that are listening is that when you're on your healing journey, like, don't forget that you have to balance this nervous system while at the same time supporting, your cellular function at the same, and to help heal the damage that may have been just from sympathetic activation, or maybe because of something else, but then the sympathetic system has sort of gone online and trying to respond to that, right? And so, like, I think maybe that's the other point that I didn't mention, is that like, it's not just like you have a stressful event that causes mitochondrial dysfunction, and then you have this sort of circle that way. It can start the other way, where you have mitochondrial dysfunction from something, maybe a medication, maybe a toxin in the environment, maybe an infection, and then that causes a sympathetic response, and you have it go that way, right? So it's like a chicken before the egg scenario. In either case, like, you have to address both to see the healing that you want to see.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to land the plane. And we didn't talk about COVID, but I think we had that mass
Yes.
idle stress event that I would imagine most people still have not recovered from, especially, I mean, up here, nothing changed. I never had to mask once, except when I flew. So that's a beautiful thing about Idaho, especially in the north part. But everywhere else in the city, I mean, lockdown, masked, it was like a mass trauma event, right? And I'd imagine most people haven't haven't cleared that, or maybe that's a generalization, but a lot of people probably.
Is it? No, I agree with you, man. Mass trauma, indeed. And then probably the biggest one we've had as a society, instead of, I mean, maybe like nuclear war and like the Black Plague, otherwise, right? So like, it's a big deal. And I think that's a good component to mention is like, it's societal, right? It's not just you. It's like, there's this sort of mass stress stuff that's happening everywhere. And that does affect us, right? And so it's important to acknowledge and also think about as you're working on your healing journey. So,
well, Scott, this has been fun. I know you have to run. Thanks so much for the quick chat, and I think it'll help people. Where do you want people to go to learn more? Transcriptions.com?
Yeah, I think from my personal stuff at Dr. Scott Sherr on Instagram, I think you can look at transcriptions for some of our products that might help along the way. Trocom, Trommune, Troz for sleep and GABAergic stuff. And then, of course, the methylene blue are Just Blue and blue cannatine more for the mitochondrial piece. So yeah, check it out. And then we have a nonprofit that does train practitioners. If you're interested in somebody to work with, we do have people that might be able to help you on this road of healing. That's the path that's never ending, right? Until, we're no longer living, no longer breathing kind of thing. So it's the path, man. Oh, thank you for having me, Matt. This is always fun. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Is that homehope.org?
Yes, at homehope.org. Yeah, is a nonprofit. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Scott.
All right. Take care, Matt.
Well, I hope you picked up some useful information from that show. That's always the goal, to not just make it philosophical and heavy on studies, but to actually share actionable tips. Dr. Scott is definitely conservative when it comes to alcohol and cannabis and tobacco as well, smoking it. And maybe because I'm not a doctor, or maybe I've just seen too many pictures online of indigenous people around the world that are smoking and even drinking daily, often several times a day, and they look phenomenal and they live into really old age. We just had Hulk Hogan die and Ozzy Osbourne, and of course they're entertainers, so a lot of travel. There's going to be a decrease in lifespan there, but it is always fascinating to look at these people around the world that aren't intentionally avoiding things, and they're still living to 110, 120 years old. And granted, maybe they have less toxicity where they live. So there are always these different variables. And I never think it's as cut and dry as social media posts make it look. I definitely think that the chronic, all day, everyday use of these things, whether it's alcohol, cannabis, tobacco, doesn't make sense because you're just chronically stimulating the system. My long-term followers might know that I used to work in the cannabis industry at dispensaries down in Southern California before it was legal at a state level. And my coworkers just smoked dabs all day, every day. And I saw the brain damage that was causing. So there's definitely a balance. And if you're prone to addiction, then yes, maybe just abstinence is the best protection. But I'm just noticing on social media lately, even an anti-coffee thing, Paul Saladino has been talking about that for years, how coffee is not good for you, which I think is just ridiculous. And whether it's coffee, cannabis, alcohol, tobacco, I think they all have their uses. And I really hope that cannabis becomes legal at a federal level someday in every state, just for its use as a painkiller, because it's something that someone could easily grow at home. And just for that use case alone, I think it's worth keeping around. And again, I'm not talking about chronic use of painkillers. The idea is to use painkillers as a bridge as you get to the root of the issue, using proper nutrition, the right forms of supplements in high enough doses, maybe the right devices, and all of that in combination, someone can get off the painkillers. So big tangent after the show. but I never hear anybody except for myself talking about how small amounts of alcohol reduce lipofuscin, because we're told that alcohol has no benefit. And if someone doesn't want to consume any of those things, great. They could still live into old age and be super healthy and vital. There's things like CO2 inhalation, which I mentioned to Scott. That has a profound effect on not only one's energy level, but also their mood. One of my favorite practices that I use pretty much every single day is LED red light therapy, which I do think is superior to incandescent, like heat lamp light therapy, because as my friend Andrew Latour repeats over and over again, the definition of photobiomodulation is non-thermal application of light. So heat lamps, like the Ray Peters talk about, is not light therapy in the strict sense of the definition. So anyway, those are my thoughts on a whole bunch of different things, because sometimes during a show, I don't have time to expand on them. Definitely recommend checking out Troscriptions. I think they've hit the big leagues. They have names like Thomas DeLauer recommending them now and different celebrities. But even with all of that, I think the integrity is still there with the products. I've been promoting them for probably 4 years now. I think a lot of people look at the liquid methylene blue products. I much prefer the troche form. It's a lot less messy and it's easy to travel with. So if you use the discount Blackburn, you could save on all of the Troscriptions products. And as I mentioned in the show, my favorite product by far is the Tromune, the cordycepin. And I've never gotten a drowsy effect from it. I think it does affect everybody differently because of genetics. And for me, it doesn't make me drowsy in the slightest. All it does is it takes the edge off, and I just feel basically more calm. My website is matt-blackburn.com. You could see all of my recommended products. The top 9 are there on the front page. I just mentioned light therapy, which I use year round, and I really feel the difference using a red light panel from Gemba Red. I use his full body one, and you can save on his website with the code Blackburn as well. And my company is called Mitolife. You can find that at mitolife.co. There are some exciting changes happening. The last couple of years I've had a lot of stress and just life stuff happen, personal life stuff. And I got distracted from my business, and my business started to go a different direction. The integrity never went down, but just the message, the appearance, everything was going a direction that I wasn't happy with. So really excited over the next year or two to slowly get back to my original vision with Mitolife. And one of those changes are going to be with the water filtration system. So for years, I've been talking about vortexing your water and structuring it. I actually interviewed Dr. Gerald Pollack from the University of Washington. He wrote the book called The Fourth Phase of Water, and other books as well, Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life, Muscles and Molecules. But this structured water thing has really blown up over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And so I'm going to be changing over the water filtration system with the same quality of water, but really emphasize the structuring part. And there's going to be 3 actions that structure the water with the filter. And you can't buy this currently from any company out there. It's a really unique system. And for those that already own the Mitolife filter that I was selling, this will be the last batch, and then it'll be gone. And some people might be concerned about getting replacement cartridges. They are open source, so you can just buy OmniPure twist-off cartridges anywhere, but I'm going to keep it easy for the people that want to keep this unit and not upgrade to the structured water one. So I will be sharing that in a future newsletter and on social media. And of course, always if you email the company, we are very responsive there as well. But I'm working on that to where I won't even have a financial incentive for you to buy those replacement filters, but it's just to take care of the customers that don't want to upgrade. That said, for now, I will be keeping the shower filter there. That's the KDF shower solution on the website, because a lot of people were begging me to not discontinue that product. And then, of course, there's all of these supplements under the wellness tab. And recently I had a show on zinc plus copper. So it's only 2 milligrams of copper. I generally take that 2 to 3 times a day. I aim for 3 times a day if I'm eating 3 meals. And I feel really good, especially now in the sunlight, now that I've increased my copper intake because of its relationship with melanin. So that is all for today. Check out Matt Blackburn on Instagram, MitoLife on Instagram. There's the YouTube channel as well if you want to go back and see old episodes. And I will see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.